But if you're a brand, if you're a Procter and Gamble brand, and you make an amazing cleaner or a great Swiffer or something like that, isn't that enough? Does it matter whether your brand manager or your CEO, is super savvy in social media, or is it a reasonable expectation that brands are media properties, which is, really sort of one of the basic premises of content marketing? Mike, do you have some thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think social really changed that equation. I mean, I think, frankly, go back to the corner store. Like, either he was heading it up and he was a personable, communicative guy that was a part of the community and was willing to work with you and sell his wares and kind of be, at that time, part of that communication system, back to the kind of golden days of advertising where you were getting your message out there through print and broadcast and radio. It's evolved now, so it's a much more participatory conversation, and social, you're right, has removed those gatekeepers, so that's incredibly fragmented and fractured, and yeah, that's hard. But, not being a part of the conversation, I don't think was ever really an option for anybody.
Right. I mean, obviously everyone does market in some fashion.
Yeah, and I mean, to get to the Swiffer point, sure, I'll take that. You don't make a mop, you make
an experience.
Marketers on the panel.
Swiffer, take me away.
Yeah. I feel good when I Swift.
It's helping a busy house mom take something off her plate, or house person, excuse me, sorry.
Right.
It isn't about the mop. I think that's probably the best way of putting it.
So in this world where brands have voices and everyone who has a smartphone and internet access and so forth effectively has sort of the same soapbox as though you're on the editorial board of the New York Times, or my thesis is anyone in this room has as much power to broadcast the message as pretty much anyone else on the face of this earth. Others might disagree, but what does that mean for public relations agencies, and what does that mean for traditional media properties before HuffPo was created and amassed so many? I mean, I don't even know the current readership numbers on it, but it's been astronomical. It's one of the most amazing success stories in modern media. So what does that mean for public relations agencies, for example?
From my perspective, I think that PR has to be given more responsibility in the room, because the thing that I think is different that we're going through right now is that you used to be able to plan campaigns, and you used to be able to do your Ogilvy ad and think it out and take 5 months and test group and focus group and refine. And if you take that time now, then I don't think you're going to fall. I like to be picky that there's a lot of brands doing a mediocre job. Mm-hmm. And in the rate of change today, it's the ones that do an excellent job that are going to succeed, that bar is rising. Mm-hmm. And so the brands who can't figure themselves out to be able to respond and engage quickly. If you think about, like, for example, HuffPost, one of our basic premises was that the article's life begins after the publish button, which was the exact opposite if you worked at the New York Times, and it's still, I think, like that at the New York Times. You put in your article, and then you maybe weeks later get some stats back. You check, did I make the front page? Mm-hmm. And that's your only guidance. And I think that that's kind of like putting up the Ogilvy one-pager. Instead, it's the beginning of the life when you play with this message, and people contribute to it, and they, in a journalistic way, they give you leads to new stories, and they correct you, and if you're not listening in a way that is actually including them, then you're missing the point. It used to be hard to find people to interview. Now you should be able to have someone on the scene 30 seconds later, or what's aren't you getting?
Yeah. I think that's clearly an expectation. What are some examples of brands that have embraced this paradigm where it's worked?
Want me to take that?
Sure.
I like to think at IBM we have. I mean, I think a great example is Watson. Assuming most of the room, it was not this past February, was it this past? No, a year ago already, February, where we had the supercomputer competition against the reigning Jeopardy champions.
Brilliant.
And it really was a brilliant execution. I mean, we started it, I don't know, a couple of months ahead of time, actually years ahead of time with the development efforts, and interviewing the researchers, the scientists, the developers that were behind the whole project. We implemented or started a grassroots movement. We had PR had a role, and traditional marketing had a role, and media had a role, and we had live watch parties, and we involved our sales force, and we involved our partners and our agencies, and I mean there was really every constituency had a role. There were authors that were coming up to us, and industry commentators, and then we had customers because we had already begun to implement the solution. So very, very credible, very authentic, and people embraced it and became very passionate. So what could have just been a simple announcement, IBM announces a supercomputer, natural language, kind of capability, now is the practical application of that. How do you use that to solve pandemics, to address crime in New York City or Chicago or Boston? How do you solve hunger, or through this massive number crunching and capability, you begin to see that, and it started really with just a couple of stories.
Let's get a very different tack. We've heard from GE and IBM and P&G. I've had experience with entrepreneurial companies, smaller companies, trying to get on the map through content marketing, and it's a very different kind of plan. There are large groups of people in large corporations, each with a job, each task, and you can have the content on a regular flow. It's much more of a challenge for a smaller business to say, how do we establish ourselves as thought leaders, and then how do we keep it up? How do we staff? How do we budget? And these are huge questions that come up, and it can be done. The big thing is that if you're a small company, you better have a good message. You can't create it out of thin air. And if you don't have good writers, get them. Because there are a bunch of companies that are throwing crap out there. I've said it earlier, but if you have quality writing, if you have ideas, services, products, whatever you have to offer, if you can communicate it well and understand who your influencers are in the market, getting the information out there. I was with what was a small digital agency, was about 25 people when I started, now it's about 120, and they did brilliant work, but they weren't on the map. So in this case, it was creating a trove of content, essentially what was called a business learning center, but a very specific kind of blog showing the expertise. Once about 20 stories were in there, we were then able to start pitching the media, say, look, we can provide expertise on X, Y, and Z, but also have links to the stories. Yada, 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 ends up with a column in the New York Times and Inc. and Amex Open Forum. But it takes a real dedication. It has to have leadership buy-in, and you have to have the budget, time, and effort to do it well.